Well, welcome to the B2B Roundtable podcast, where we bring together ideas, people, strategies shaping the future of sales and marketing. And today I'm joined by my friend, Brent Adamson, and he's one of the most influential voices here in sales. You might know Brent from his groundbreaking book, The Challenger Sale, which completely reshaped how we think about commercial conversations. And I am really excited because Brent and I are going to talk about his new book, The Framemaking Sale. And it couldn't come at a more urgent time. In a survey, a recent survey, 75% of B2B buyers said they prefer to purchase without ever talking to a salesperson or a sales rep. So is this the end of sales as we know it? We'll see as we talk to Brent, or could it be something better? And we're going to talk about why buyers lost confidence in sales, what's driving the shift, what it really means to be a frame maker, how leaders like CMOs and VPs of sales can build teams and work with customers where customers actually want to talk to sales reps, and what the future of selling looks like in an AI-driven world. So, Brent, you open up your book, like we said, 75% of B2B buyers would prefer a rep-free buying experience. That's wild.
Yeah, so first of all, it's great to see you, Brian, as always, and thanks for the invite on the show. So that, just to give attribution where it's due, it's a Gartner statistic. It's one of the last pieces of research I was involved with before my departure from Gartner in 2022, I think it was. Yeah. And again, it was thousands of B2B buyers all involved in a large, complex purchase. And we I don't even know who was on the team. Someone came up with this idea, like, let's ask customers a hypothetical. And the hypothetical was simply exactly what you just said. If you could imagine a world where it was possible to buy this large, complex solution without ever talking to a sales rep at all, is that what you'd prefer? And 75% of the respondents said yes, leading to this idea of what we call a rep-free experience. And, it's interesting, when I went around the world presenting that piece of data that's now sort of sitting at the front of the book, The Framemaking Sale, we would get two reactions to it, Brian. The first reaction was, I'm surprised that number's so small. It's like, who are these other 25% of people who actually do want to talk to a sales rep? That was really this sort of cynical, somewhat tongue-in-cheek answer. The flip side was actually much more interesting, which was a lot of sales leaders and sales reps would say, I just don't buy it. I don't believe it. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, it can't be true. At least it's not true for us at our company, because we're just not seeing it, because you can't buy our solution without talking to our salespeople. So every one of our deals has a salesperson involved. It's got customization, it's got configuration, it's complex. We co-design it. So it's literally impossible to buy from our company without talking to a sales professional. So therefore, this makes no sense. It might be true in general, but it's not true for us. And it was always at that point, Brian, where I would tell them, or hopefully very gently and diplomatically say or suggest, just to be clear, the data is not saying 75% of people buy, or customers buy, a solution without talking to sales reps. It's that they would prefer to buy. In other words, this isn't a measure of customers' reality. It's a measure of customers' preference. And the fact that you are seeing 100% of customers in your company buy from your sellers is actually not a great thing. It's problematic in the sense that what that implies is there's this large and arguably increasing gap between customer preference and customer reality. And when you see that gap, I think in many ways represents risk. Just the reason why it's at the front of the book is kind of because I think we could talk about how we got here and why we got here. And, I think how we got here is Glengarry Glen Ross, right? It's Boiler Room. It's Wolf of Wall Street. It's like, you show up and you speeds and feeds and tell me why you're great. And there's misaligned incentives. And I know that you get paid more if I buy from you. And so there's all these things going on. And now, of course, add to that, first of all, the internet, and now more importantly, I suppose, or more dominantly, AI. Customers are like, well, all you can do is show up and tell me about your company. I can kind of do that without you. So I don't really just see a need to talk to you. So what was interesting about this data back in the Gartner days when we first presented, it led to the story of, like, if customers aren't going to talk to your people, then they're going to talk to you through digital channels. And we talked about this sort of, how do we create an omni-channel go-to-market model, and connecting your digital presence to your in-person presence, all that kind of stuff. But since I left Gartner, the thing, Brian, that I've been thinking about most, and I've been really sort of wondering is, what if it didn't have to be like that? I mean, what would that world look like? And the drumbeat question, the heart and soul of the Framemaking Sale, is a very simple, but I think powerful, I hope powerful question, which is, what would it take to be the one seller, the one sales team that your customers actually do want to talk to? what would that look like? How would you have to show up? How would you have to engage with customers such that you, because imagine that world where you could differentiate yourself not just from other sellers, but also differentiate yourself from all that other information that customers have access to independently. That could be an incredibly powerful place to be if you could be the one person that shows up, the customers say, actually, I don't want to talk to sellers, but I do want to talk to Brian. And that's what this book's about.
So it's, in one way, it's not the end of sales as we know it. It's the end of salespeople not adding value as we know it, right?
Yeah. Or is it, the way I think the way we put it in the book was, yeah, I think here's how I put it in the book, which is the end of sales as we know it? Maybe, but it doesn't have to be the end of sales altogether, right? Which is exactly what you just said with other words, right? But it is this question of, and I think in some ways it truly is existential. I mean, not to be overly dramatic, and everything in everything about AI is like it's the end of this, the end of that, the end of this, everything else, right? It's like, but if we truly are showing up in sales in a way that doesn't add value, that customers don't see as desirable, something they're actually quite actively avoiding, and now they can do all the things that you were doing in sales through sales interactions on their own. I mean, literally, what are you even there for? What's your purpose? What's the, I come at this not from the book is all written from a sort of a customer's perspective in terms of the challenges they're facing and how to help, as a seller, help solve those challenges. But Brian, you and I both geek out on, last time you and I did one of these podcasts together was many years ago, and we got really deep, you remember, into empathy and understanding empathy.
Yeah.
And we had this really fun conversation about empathy. So you and I come at it, we're very human-centric sort of researchers and advisors and writers and thinkers. And I think there's this really interesting question / reality, and we can dive into this more at some point if you like, but to be clear, the data says 75% of buyers would prefer a rep-free experience, but the data does not say, nor did we ever even think to ask the question, the data doesn't say 75% of B2B buyers would prefer a human-free experience. And I think that's a difference. If you could show up as a little bit less seller and a little bit more human, I think you have this opportunity to differentiate yourself again, not just from other sellers, but from other sources of information and learning that frankly are actually not helpful to customers now. They're just kind of overwhelming. It is such an interesting watershed moment for the sales profession to finally do, the book ends very aspirational. I don't normally start this way because people don't know what the heck I'm talking about. You got to get through a couple hundred pages to get there. But there's this moment at the end of the book in chapter 10 where I simply say, or observe, I don't know that there's ever been a time where doing what's right for sales and what's doing right for humanity have been better aligned than they are today. And I find that to be very aspirational and also very inspirational to think that you and I, because look, we've devoted our entire adult careers to this profession of sales in some way or another. And it's something that you and I both believe in, but we're also come at it from a deep level of frustration, as many of us do, which is the way it's typically carried out in a sort of conventional wisdom sort of way. But we both see the potential here to be so much more and to be so much more valuable and to be so much more meaningful. And that's, in some ways, is what this book is about. It's not all aspiration. The book starts with a bar chart. It says, by the way, this is the best way to get paid. So at the end of the day, it's all about getting paid. It's going to Cancun, getting your Lucite trophy, you put on your credenza. And if you want all those things, if you want President's Club, if you want to, land the whales and do the big deals, it's not just this helps you be a better human being. It's like, no, this actually is going to make you the most money. And I think that the fact that those two things are so closely aligned now is super exciting.
It is exciting. And, as I'm listening, and if I'm one of the sales reps listening out there, or I'm a sales leader, if customers don't want to talk to one kind of sales rep, what is it that customers really do want? What's the data showing that they want from salespeople, if anything?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't have a bar chart that says that specifically. I do have, but the bar chart, there's the bar chart that sort of launched 1,000 Ships, or at least launched this book, is this. And it's research that we first started doing at Gartner CB back in the day, trying to understand what needs to happen inside of a sale, inside of a purchase, in order to increase the likelihood of customers buying what we call a high quality, low regret purchase, or a high quality, low regret deal. And a high quality, low regret deal. So high quality simply means it's the bigger purchase with the broader scope, the bigger footprint, the higher price point, the higher margins. The kind of deals we're all trying to do. When we say we want a solution sell, it's that kind of deal, right? Usually when you buy a higher complex or a more complex deal with a broader scope and all those things, it oftentimes comes with a certain amount of buyer remorse or regret, right? It's like that first time you bought your home, right? You bought a home and you wake up next morning, you think, I bought what? It's like kind of terrifying.
Buyer's remorse,
Right. So what we're looking for is the unicorn, which is how do I increase the likelihood of customers buying the higher quality deal, but having lower regret at the same time? It's like the old pat your head, rub your tummy, right? So the short version is we ran anything and everything we could possibly think of through that statistical model, including all the different aspects of the challenger approach, teach, tailor, take control. We broke it into its constituent elements, ran that through seller techniques, seller approaches, methodologies, marketing content. You and I geek out on marketing all the time. So we looked at different attributes of marketing and volume of marketing and channel of marketing. We looked at buying side, like, how many people are involved, did different stakeholders and titles, you name it. Of all that work that we did, the thing that came out by far, an order of magnitude by far, more likely to increase the likelihood of a high quality, low regret deal is the degree to which customers report a high level of confidence in the decision that they're making on behalf of their company. So we call this decision confidence. And decision confidence, it increases when customers report a high degree of decision confidence. They're not 10% more likely to buy a high quality, low regret deal. They're 10 times more likely. It's almost like it's like a 988% increase. It's crazy that if I could say, what if I could increase the likelihood of you selling that deal, Brian, by 10x? It'd be hard to believe in some ways, right? But the answer is, well, what we need to do is we need to run everything through this lens of customer confidence, which stands to reason, right? If customers aren't confident in making a multi, 5, 6, 7, 8-figure decision, multi-million-dollar deal on behalf of their company, if they're not confident making that decision, they're going to choose not to choose. And so when I meet with teams, the first thing I'll tell them is like, everything we do in sales, everything we do in marketing, everything we do in customer engagement, customer success, we need to run it through the lens of how does this engagement, digital or in person, how does it help customers feel more confident in the decision that they're making? Now, if I may just bang on for just a second, because this gets really interesting. This is where the story takes this weird left turn, because when I say that, ultimately, I find almost inevitably, people run to the same conclusion. Number one is, well, that seems obvious, doesn't it? Customers aren't confident, they're going to choose not to choose. But what's next is almost everybody, particularly CEOs for some reason, I don't know why, like the higher up you get, the more the gravitational pull here is so interesting. What people will say is, see, this is exactly what I was talking about. Customers need to be confident. And that is why, Brent, that is why, team, that I've told you that everything we need to do has got to be designed to help customers feel more confident in us, in our product, in our features, in our brand, in our people. That's why we need to be a thought leader. That's why we need to be a trusted advisor. It's like, if you could just be a trusted advisor, being customers will be confident in you and then they'll buy. It's at that point where the story takes a weird left turn, because it's always where I have to say, again, with respect, yes and. It's like a yes and, right? It's like, which is, okay, sure, that stuff matters, but that's not what this bar chart's about. That's not what decision confidence. In other words, all of this analysis shows that this massive impact on growth, this massive impact on customers buying a high quality, low regret deal, it turns out it's things like, if you take that decision confidence bar in this bar chart and you break it into its constituent elements, it's things like, as a customer, how confident are we that we even asked the right questions in the first place? How confident are we that we've done sufficient research to figure this out? How confident are we that we've thoroughly explored all the different alternative approaches? How confident are we that we're even aligned as a team on the problem we're trying to solve, let alone the right solution, let alone the right supplier? And so the punchline of all this, and there's a longer, believe it or not, I know I'm rambling on, but there's an even longer version of unpacking this. But the punchline is, it turns out that when you really unpack these dimensions of confidence, two things turn out to be true. One is, none of those things are objective. Like, which questions are the right ones? I don't know. Those or those. How much of research is sufficient? So all of these different attributes of defining a world-class deal and driving growth, not a single one of them has an objective finish line. They're not based on what you know. They're based on what you feel. Specifically, do you feel confident? So while we're all in sales and in marketing solving for getting customers to know something, it turns out the single biggest secret passage to growth is getting customers to feel something. That's one. Two is this. When you look at those dimensions of confidence, it turns out that not a single one's about the supplier. How confident are we that we asked the right questions? How confident are we that we did sufficient research? Notice, it's not just those questions are customer-centric. Brian, they're actually supplier agnostic. In other words, at the end of the day, yes, we need to solve for customer confidence, but it's not customers' confidence in us that matters. It's customers' confidence in themselves. And that is what's led me to drop everything in my life and put my family's finances on hold and write a book and go. I tell people I'm all in. I just don't know if I'm all in on red or black. But because I think we're all walking right past this just massive opportunity. What an exciting opportunity to think, what does it look like? What does it feel like to go to market, to sell, to engage customers in such a way that is designed specifically not to improve their supplier confidence, but to improve their self-confidence? What does that look like? And the book is an attempt to answer that.
Well, I have so many questions that I
Yeah.
wish we had 3 hours just to talk. Because
That's all good. You know me, I'll do it.
No, me too.
There's no one to listen though. That's the problem. But I
I know.
rambled on there. So where, I mean, we could
was
go into lots
awesome.
what would you like to dig into? Because I
Well,
laid it all out there. So that's the premise. Go ahead.
I think why don't we just start with, can you define frame making for us?
Yeah.
And what is it and how is it different than the challenger sale? Like, because
Okay.
that, I think, I want to also come back to the whole confidence question too, but we got a frame. What is frame making?
Cool. Yeah. So actually, the two are actually closely tied. So
Totally.
the frame making and confidence. So this idea of, okay, if customers' confidence not in you, but in themselves, it matters most. Why does that matter? Is because customer confidence is arguably under massive threat, right? It's customers are struggling not just to buy, but to decide. And in the book, we unpack four main challenges to customer confidence. So there's decision complexity, just all the different people, all the different steps, all the, it's like, oh, Calgon, take me away. That's a 70s
Totally.
reference and no one will get, but you may get that.
I
one.
get it.
Yeah.
We're
All
the
right,
same
cool.
generation.
You're right, I know. It's such a Gen X reference. But anyway, so decision complexity, information overload. There's just so much information over there, and AI doesn't help, right? Because every time I change the prompt, I get a different answer. So now it's like, I don't even know what to think, what to believe, what to read, what to consume.
Yep.
There's objective misalignment, which is if it were just up to me, I'd buy from you today, but I've got these 5 other people and they're all trying to do different things. And like, how do we even get the cats herded around a problem, let alone a solution, let alone a supplier? And then finally is this really weird one around outcome uncertainty, which is you've just shown me all the ways you've had massive impact for 5 other companies and all the ROI and the total cost of ownership, all, the amazing value, the value selling that you've generated for these other companies. And I believe you. I believe you, Brian. I believe every one of those raving fans that has loved you and seen nothing but value from you. But we're going to find some way to screw this up because we're just different. So it's not that I lack confidence in you. I lack confidence in our ability internally to execute on your amazing solution. So again, decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment, and outcome uncertainty. Each one of these things, so in the book, what we do is we take them one at a time and we unpack them and just show, like, let me give you a sense for why this is so hard, all the different dynamics, why are these why are these challenges deeply undermining customer confidence? And then we offer a solution. And for each one of these solutions, like, how do I help customers feel more confident in the decision process, in information, in objectives, in outcomes? And as we do that, the solution set always follows the same sort of pattern, which is how do I take something that's big and hard and overwhelming and just narrow it down to the subset of questions, the subset of concerns that matter most? How do I help them prioritize? It's like, yeah, there's 50 things it seems like you got to worry about, but these 3 things or these 3 people or these 3 steps are the ones that matter most, not based on my expertise or my thinking, but based on other customers like you who've gone down this journey. We'll come back to that point. That's a social proof point. And I might prompt you at the same time. By the way, here's the 3 things you're worried about. And here's the 3 things we find customers like you find are most valuable to focus on first. And there's one of these that actually is a little surprising that sometimes people overlook. And so what I'm doing is I'm engaging in something there that's called prompting and bounding. I'm taking something big and bounding it. And I'm prompting you to think about something you haven't thought about. Those 2 things together, prompting and bounding, create a framework within which you can operate to come to your own decision. Now, I don't just show up and tell you, here's what you need to do. Because we actually know from research it actually does damage. Because I'm trying to solve, if I show up as an expert telling you what you need to do, it turns out what happens really weirdly, but maybe not surprisingly, is the customers become less confident, not more. And the reason why is because I'm trying to solve for your confidence in me as an expert, rather than your confidence in your ability as someone who's made their own decision. So by creating this framework or this frame, and then allowing a certain number of degrees of freedom for your customers to operate much more efficiently and effectively within that frame such that they can come to their own conclusion, then they're more confident that they've decided what they want to do. And so that in a nutshell is frame making. Then we take this idea and turn it into actual tactics and very practical practices and show you what it looks like and feels like against each of those 4 challenges. But the frame making idea at its heart has sort of 2 objectives. One is ease and one is agency. How do we make these decisions easier for you while maintaining your sense of agency that you're the one that made a decision?
Well, I'm thinking about this and I'm listening and like, I'm sure, and as I was listening to you, there's ways sellers are
Yeah.
undermining confidence without even realizing it. One of the things you were talking about is coming across as an expert. So
Hmm.
if I'm a VP of sales and marketing, how would I coach my team differently? Like, what are the things that
Yeah.
you see or you notice that people are doing right now that are undermining this whole idea of customer confidence?
Well, there's one is, and this goes to, so we haven't touched on your other question, which is,
Yeah,
how does this relate to Challenger? So in
totally.
some ways, I think this is completely complementary to Challenger. In some ways, it actually plugs some holes that Challenger creates. And let me tell you what I mean. So Challenger at its heart, this whole idea of reframing customers' thinking, so showing up and showing a new way to save money, make money that they haven't
Hmm.
fully thought of, that effectively is a prompt, right? So that is as we think about building a frame, you are essentially framing customers thinking about their business problems. So I think in many ways, Challenger fits squarely within the bigger idea of frame making as an example of what it could look like and feel like. The flip side, so that's sort of how they're very complementary. And for a lot of companies doing Challenger today, I think frame making is the obvious next place to go. And it's new, it's powerful, it's fresh, and it's solving for something we didn't think to solve for. And like this whole idea of customer self-confidence wasn't even on our radar screen when we wrote Challenger
Hmm.
because it just wasn't an issue because buying wasn't so hard. But there's another aspect of Challenger which I think is actually more problematic. And this, I say this with love for Challenger, and the book still sits back here behind me, and I still believe in it. And it's so I'm not trying to throw it under the bus by any stretch. But at the end of the day, Challenger was very much, as you know, a content strategy, right? It's based on this thing called commercial insight, showing up and sharing with your customer an insight that changes the way they think about their business.
Hmm.
And when I was first presenting, particularly of these four challenges I mentioned before that customers struggling with, information overload becomes this major challenge. And as I was presenting this challenge and the fact that customers are overwhelmed with high quantities of high quality information, it's like everybody's telling me what to do. Everybody's got a thought. Everybody's got data. Everybody's got research.
Yeah.
And so in that kind of environment where you show up with a commercial insight is like, great, I'll just put it on the pile with the 10 other ideas that, it's just so overwhelming. It doesn't actually help. In some ways, it's just like, oh God, there's one more thing I got to worry about. And I think what happened, and I mean, you were there, we were both there, right? I think somewhere around 2013 in the marketing world, I think what happened is every CEO on the same morning of probably a Tuesday woke up and said, we're having a hard time differentiating. So I know how we're going to stand out in the marketplace. We're going to become a thought leader, right? Because if we can become
Yeah.
a thought leader, that's going to allow us to stand out and become our customers' trusted advisor and all those things. And marketers said, well, we got a strategy for that. We'll call that content marketing. And HubSpot said, I got technology for that. We'll call it marketing automation. And so we started just generating massive amounts of high quality content, because big data hit about the same
Yeah.
time. And so now we got evidence-based, data-driven expertise produced at scale and delivered to the world in massive amounts of massive quantities, all in the name of trying to stand out and look different. I call this the smartness arms race. And just like the actual one ended in a tie and mutual assured destruction, this one did too, where everyone's like, now everybody looks smart, but customers are just, the only one to lose is your customer because they're overwhelmed. And so I was presenting a meeting a number of years ago on these ideas, early version of these ideas in Palo Alto.
Hmm.
We were talking about this very phenomenon, and there's a head of sales there, and he literally stopped the meeting because he was getting frustrated. I tend to do that to people. Ask my wife. And he said, "But Brent, hold, stop." He said, Brent, I did what you told me to do."
Yeah.
And I don't know about Brian, but I find nothing ever ends well when someone starts a conversation with Brent. I did what you told me to do. It's like, because then they tell me what they did. It's like, I told you that. That's horrible. Why would I ever say that? But he said, but actually what he said made a solid sense. He said, look, we adopted Challenger. We're big on Challenger. And while all of our competitors are out there telling the market they need to zig, and they've got data and they've got research, but Brent, we're challenging. So we're not telling them zig. We're telling our customers they need to zag. So we're challenging. And I said, that's awesome. And I was really happy for him. And he was really proud of himself. But I said, let me ask you this. I said, what happens when you're from your customer's perspective? They're telling me to zig and they've got data, they've got research, they've got experts. You're telling me to zag and you've got data, you've got experts, you've got research. Now I don't know what to do. Now I'm just confused at a higher level. And so what I need to do now is like maybe, I think I need a little more time to go look at this. Why don't you call me back in 6 months and I can do a little more research. Your customers never truly want you to call them back in 6 months. Right? And I think what that customer is looking for in that moment, Brian, is not another insight that bends their brains. What they're looking for is someone to say, could someone please just sit down and help me just make sense out of all this? Help me just figure out like what matters most. Where do they overlap? Can we just boil this down to a couple questions I need to ask such that I could feel like I could make a choice? Because and that's again, example of frame making. And so The word that we did not ever consider, I was there from the very beginning, the word we never considered in Challenger, because we didn't need to, was the word context. Because in the world of Challenger, particularly back in 2011, or even back in 2008, believe it or not, when we first did the research, the world of sales was purely features and benefits and speeds and feeds and show up and throw up around, our product. So when you showed up with an insight about the customer's company, you were so completely differentiated. That alone was sufficient to help you stand out. But in today's world of thought leadership, where everybody's saying smart things about the world and about their customers, your insight now exists in a completely different context than it did all those years ago. And now, where that context changes things pretty dramatically, is customers saying, I just need help. And if you show up in that world and say, yeah, but have you looked at my insight? You're not being very helpful. You're certainly not helping them feel more confident in themselves. And that's this opportunity to show up today and say, and we go through the book of like how you do this and what it sounds like and how you say this and where the insights come from. We break it down very tactically. At least we try to. And in the workshops we're doing now, we do it even more tactically. We really break it down. But I think at a high level is this question of what we call sensemaking, which is a form of framemaking. Of let me help you just make sense out of everything you're learning so that you feel better about making a choice.
I really like that word, sense making. I heard you in a speech use it before, and it paints just a clear word picture, because we're trying to make sense of it all. And that's what you're saying is, as a customer, they're overwhelmed for all the four different reasons you talked about.
Yeah.
And they simply need help making sense of it. And that's sense making.
And let's go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. 75% of customers prefer a rep-free experience. You know why? It's because you're just making it harder. You're just giving me one more thing to worry about, or you're just adding no value at all. You're telling me things that I already know, right? But if someone, and I'm just trying to make sense out of all this. And the reason why I want to talk to a seller is because I don't see them as an agent of helping me make sense out of anything. But if you show up as that person, as the person that will help them just make sense out of all this and just help them figure out what they need to do such that they can come to a conclusion they feel decent about. That's someone, you call them sales, call them Bob, call them whatever you want, but that's your opportunity to stand out, is to show up as that human being. And that's really, I think, such an interesting opportunity.
As I think about it from the perspective of, my listeners are like CMOs or CROs, sales and marketing VPs, come Monday morning, and they're thinking about what they just heard, what they're talking about. How can they start building into their team, their sales teams, into framemakers? How do they begin? What's the start of this process?
So I think, Brian, what's neat about framemaking is, at least I think it's neat, I hope others will find, is it can be very tactical and relatively simple, or it can actually get quite sort of there's like levels, like 101, 201, 301, and you can get into some really cool sort of marketing tools and maturity models and diagnostics, things like that. But at its most basic, but I think in many ways its most powerful level, framemaking is just, it's a nudge. It's a piece of advice, a little bit of guidance. So one of the stories we tell in the book is it's a real story of a real company. We changed some of the names to just partly because I didn't actually know the original names, but that's all right. So we call her Tara, T-A-R-A. Tara is a made up name of a real salesperson. And this is a story of a friend of mine who's since retired. He was a head of sales at a big HCM, human capital management company. And he went on a ride along. He told me this story a number of years ago. And he went on a ride along with, we'll call her Tara, to a company that was relatively early on in the pipeline. So it was an early sort of discovery sort of conversation where they were going to call on the head of HR, because it's human capital management, and have a discovery conversation. So they go in, and Kevin's in the area, so he does a ride along, because what head of sales doesn't like to do ride alongs with their star sellers? It's just fun. So, all right, that's the context. So they go in, they sit down, and they walk into the office of the head of HR. And right before the meeting's about to start, so again, true story, the company's head of procurement walks in and says, "I'm so sorry, I'm late. Didn't mean to keep you waiting." Sits down and says, "But I'm ready to go. Let's go." So what are we talking about? And Kevin, who's the head of sales, is sitting in the corner, is like, "Say what now? Like what?" He's like, saying the head of freaking procurement just walked in a discovery conversation, like completely like, "Oh, this should be interesting. See how Tara handles this, because that doesn't happen every day." And Tara handled it like amazing. So the conversation went well. They had these long conversations about priorities and objectives and process, and got things all aligned. And by the time it was over, the two were like the head of HR and the head of procurement, like all aligned. And they get in the rental car to go back to the airport. And Kevin looks at Tara and says, That was crazy. It's like you handled that so well. I mean, you didn't even miss a beat when the head of procurement walked in, and you had what an incredible. He was so over the moon. Like what an incredible outcome. But he said, but how did the head of procurement even get there in the first place? This is so weird. And Tara looked at Kevin and said, well, Kevin, the head of procurement was there because I suggested to the head of HR that she invite him. And Kevin said, what? And he lost his mind. It's so funny watching Kevin tell this story. It's like he said, I went nuts. It's like, what are you doing on? You're like inviting procurement. They come in late. They blow everything up. Why would you like? And Tara said, well, Kevin, the reason why I suggested that she invite him is because usually procurement gets in late. They blow everything up. They ask a bunch of questions. And what I've learned from other companies is that when procurement gets involved in early, things go so much better, kind of like today. And Kevin's like, oh yeah, oh no, that's actually really brilliant. And this is a good example of framemaking. It's just a very specific, small example of framing, which is it's just a gentle nudge, a piece of advice, which is from Tara's perspective, it sounds like not like I've been doing this for 30 years. You want to talk to procurement here. Like nobody's listening to Tara then. But what Tara said is, we call this the phrase that frames. In working with other customers like you, one of the things that we have found is it can get incredibly frustrating when we make a lot of progress over several months and you get really excited by the solution and then procurement gets involved and everything kind of goes off the rails. And nobody wants to be in that position because it's just painful for everybody. So what we've learned from some of the smartest, most progressive of these organizations is that they're actually beginning to bring procurement in very early as part of the discovery conversation. And just what we're seeing there is this might be something you want to try because we think it actually could really work well for you and shorten the cycle time and just make you feel a lot more confident moving forward. And notice, and we call that's a version of what we call this phrase that frames. So it starts with, in working with other customers like you, one of the things we've learned is.
Yeah.
And notice my posture here from Tara's perspective is no longer as an expert, but it's as what we call a connector. I'm connecting you to the experiences of other companies like you. What's the one thing, Brian, every company wants to know? They want to know what other companies like them are doing. They don't want to know what Tara thinks, but they do want to know what other companies like them are thinking. This is, Cialdini calls this social proof, right? And it's very powerful, right? So if I can show, so now what's interesting about this, I love this because when I go talk to people like Howard Dover down at the University of Texas, Dallas, and meet with his students and talk about how they could go sell to senior executives as a 20-something coming right out of college, I said, what if your value as a seller isn't your expertise? What if it's your access? What is the fact that you have access to other companies like them? And what you're really doing is putting them together in these conversations and working with other customers like you. And this is I love this because it's something quite literally any seller can do from day one. Maybe they haven't seen this, but other people on their team have. So the whole idea is it's all based on this idea of asymmetry of information, which is you as an individual or you as a company have a better understanding of how that customer should navigate their buying process than the customer themselves does. And you can share that through expertise presented in a way based on social proof such that you become an instrument of helping them feel more confident in what they're doing.
Well, this is fascinating. And I'm wondering if from a marketing perspective, because I just wanted to, when I think about where Challenger started, you said, well, it was about a content strategy. And I'm just wondering, what role does marketing play in this shift? Like, how do they ride along? Or how did marketing and sales work together towards this end of frame making?
I think the answer is absolutely nothing, and marketing probably should be banned. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. He's all in the delivery. No, that was horrible. That wasn't even funny, Brent. Sorry.
I gave you a pity laugh, and maybe but I get it.
Cut that out in post, or don't. But no, but I think so. To me, what we're really talking about is creating a certain experience for the customer. And as you and I both know, there's multiple channels through which you can create an experience through human interaction, through digital, but one way or another. So when we take framemaking, we divide it into 3 steps. We call it the 3 E's of establish the framing, engage customers with the framing, and then execute over time such that we not only increase but maintain customer self-confidence across a long deal. And marketing can be involved in literally every one of those steps, establishing the framing. So who actually goes out to other companies and learns about their experience? Like, what are the lessons learned, the best practices and the pitfalls, the things that they wish they'd done differently? So here's a super easy example. Win-loss analysis. Win-loss is usually owned by, or customer testimonials. Both those things are traditionally owned by marketing in a lot of companies, right? So what if our win-loss / customer testimonial gathering was based on talking to customers, not about how great we are, how much they love us, or how much they're a raving fan, or how much they'd recommend us, but rather about navigating the purchase journey. We were simply to ask them something like, hey, if you were to go on, so let's take a customer that's just managed to buy your solution successfully, and you were to ask them this, If thinking back across the last 12 to 18 months of buying that solution and getting this decision across the finish line, if you had to do it all over again, what might you do differently just to make your lives just a little bit easier? Whatever they say next, I guarantee you, is a piece of gold. And that piece of gold can be farmed out to your sales team or put in collateral. Imagine it turns into a piece of content, like three steps to avoid, or 2 steps to, like the 5 steps of buying an HCM solution. Two of them are things that most people overlook. That was horrible copy editing, but you get the idea, right? So there's where I could turn it into like a readiness checklist. Ready to buy HCM? Take the checklist, to take the Cosmo quiz or whatever it is. Or I could just take that information and put it in the hands of sales reps and turn it into collateral or content. I can put on websites. The more formal, all singing, all dancing version is something I've done at companies I've been at, is turned into like a full-on maturity model or a full-on diagnostic tool. At CEB, we had these things called the anatomy of a world-class marketing organization, the anatomy of a world-class sales organization. I did a stint for about a year and a half at a little company called Ecosystems in the value management space. And I created an entire 5-level maturity model for value management that turned out to be really powerful. So, then once you build those, there's all sorts of use cases for them about benchmarking, prioritization, all that kind of stuff. So there is so much opportunity here for marketing. If we just, same as sales, stop and ask, what if we built a marketing strategy not around making customers more confident in us and our brand and our product, but we built a content strategy or marketing strategy around helping customers feel more confident in themselves. Step 1, figure out where does that confidence lacking now? What have others learned to overcome those challenges? And how can we help them? How can we help similar customers overcome that same challenge as well?
I love,
sky's the limit on marketing, man. It's like totally, it gets me all jazzed.
I think of all the different things. I was just talking to a client about building a voice of customer interview. And your question is gold if you're doing interviews to understand, take me back to the day. Take me back to that time. And helping really understand what they wished or what they would do differently now that they know. And listen, I mean, it seems, again, now you said it, it's like, of course, this is totally obvious, but it's not,
I've made a whole career out of doing that. Everyone read challenges.
Wait a minute.
It's like, well, yeah, you weren't saying that before we wrote the book.
Wait a minute. I love it. So if with AI moving so fast, what do you think that the future of sales holds right now? I wanted to just get your perspective because it's a question I think on many people's minds,
Yeah, I think there's a couple answers to this, but the brief, there's all sorts of tools, AI tools you could use to engage in these, particularly in creating framing in the first place. So it's a little more technical, but super interesting and really powerful. Let's park that. To me, here's where I think AI at a high level is interesting is, it's a quick story. So the other day, I was on Instagram because we're all humans and now we're all on Instagram apparently. But and Instagram's got, because the algorithm is like spying on me, it understands me deeper than I understand myself. And so it decided, based on my dog that was just barking in the background here, that I needed to see advertisements for human grade dog food such that I would, feel miserable and hate myself for giving my dog not as good dog food. That's right. I'd go out and so now I feel like, I've got to do something about this. My dog's a rescue dog. She's got digestive issues. If I were truly a good dog owner, I'd pay more attention to this. So I said, all right, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to go look into human grade dog food. So I figured, well, you know what? I'm going to do what B2B buyers are doing today. I'm going to go build effectively an RFP for human grade dog food using Copilot. So I went to Copilot and I asked it lots of questions and who are the different competitors? What are the different advantages, disadvantages? What's the social proof? What's the reputation? What's the business, the pricing and the package deal? And make a recommendation. So I asked everything I could possibly think of, essentially to do an RFP for human grade dog food. And I asked it to present it to me in a table, so it'd be nice and exported. And so it's even in a frame, right? And I printed it out because I'm old school and I print things out still. And I got to be honest with you, I got really excited. It's like, wow, I made a table in AI. Look at me. I was all excited, right? And I took it down to the kitchen. This is a true story. And I showed it to my wife and I told her exactly what I just told you and what I was doing. And she looked at it and said, oh, wow. So what does it say? And I said, well, it says we should go with this brand. If anyone cares, it was the farmer's dog. And she said, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And then she looked at me, looked at it, and she said, so what do you think we should do? And I looked at her and looked at her and said, I don't know. What do you think we should do? And she said, I don't know. And you know what she said next, Brian? She said, I kind of wish we could talk to someone. I kind of wish we could talk to like a couple dog owners and just kind of get their thoughts. Because sure, this is what AI thinks, but I don't know. I mean, I just like to talk to someone. And that to me was such a, I know it's a long story. It's kind of like, why is he talking about this?
Yeah.
Because to me, viscerally, it was such a crystallizing moment, which is that right there. That's, I don't care how good AI becomes. I think at some point, at least for the foreseeable future, I think most customers, because we're human beings, are going to say, I wish I could just talk to someone. And my question is, what does it take to be the seller that shows up in a way such that you think, and I think I need to talk to Brian? That to me is like, there is such a huge opportunity for us going forward to be incredibly powerful, incredibly successful, incredibly, frankly, wealthy, if you want, salespeople, but more importantly, incredibly valuable salespeople in this environment. If you are the obvious answer to, I wish I could just talk to someone about this. And that's how we show up. And that's how we differentiate ourselves, not just from other sellers, but from AI as well, is by, again, customers, we know from data they prefer a rep-free experience. I don't know that they prefer a human-free experience. Show up as a human.
That is, you landed it. I love what
it's right up your alley, isn't it? I mean, you and I are
so,
you're the empathy guy.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, like, this is so, I see it because you and I are cut from the same cloth. And again, the center of this whole piece is empathy. And the center of this whole thing is human connection. Like, that's the hill I'm going to die on for the next 5 years, if not for the rest. And maybe that's the same thing. I don't know. But clearly, whether it's our politics, our society, our sales, our commerce, we are desperately in need of better, greater, deeper human connection to each other today in the world we live in. And this is just a way I'm trying to bake it back into the world of commerce, because I think it's not only critical, it's not to be cynical, or it's like, this is how you're going to get paid. You want to go to Cancun? You want the Lucite trophy on your credenza? I don't even know what a credenza is, and I want a Lucite trophy on it, right? And it's like, this is how you do it. And it's like, there's never been a time, Brian, where doing what's right for sales and marketing and doing what's right for humanity have been better aligned than today. And that's cool.
It's super cool because in a lot of ways, empathy seems to be under attack because people think that it takes us out of where we should be focused, the rational, logical side. But as we just learned, B2B is emotional. Decision-making is emotional. We need to simplify complexity. And what does empathy do? It helps us understand the perspective of another person, how they think and feel. What happens when you do that? You can connect better. If I understand better, I can connect better. And for our listeners, if you want to dive deeper into what we just talked about, get a copy of Brent's book. I have a copy here. And
they're back there. They're lime green. If you like lime green.
It's way prettier than this. This is the Kindle version. I wanted to get it right away. It's full of practical strategies, real world stories. And as you just heard from Brent today, it's going to change the way you approach your sales. I know that it's doing that for mine. So I want to say thanks, Brent. Always awesome talking with you.
I appreciate you, Ben.